If you have ever wondered whether Jesus and Shankara were basically saying the same thing and just needed a better translator, Dippack Mistri has thoughts.
This episode goes deep into one piece that maps biblical phrases onto Vedantic Mahavakyas, tracing what non-dualism looks like across two very different scriptural traditions.
Let's start with what the Mahavakyas actually are, and why putting the biblical ones next to the Vedantic ones turns out to matter.
The central question here is whether the great declarations of the biblical tradition and the Mahavakyas of Vedanta are pointing at the same underlying reality, or whether the resemblance is superficial.
The post opens with Ramanamaharshi setting the frame. All the faiths that prevail in the world affirm, to begin with, the existence of the world, the soul, and God. The two contentions, namely that one reality is sensed as threefold and that they are three distinct entities, are upheld as intellectual convictions, while the sense "I am the body" persists.
So the argument is that dualism, the felt conviction of separateness, is not a doctrinal position, but a perceptual condition. The Mahavakyas, biblical and Vedantic alike, are addressed precisely to that condition.
The mapping itself is the engine of the piece. Son of Man lines up with the ego, the jiva, the finite self caught in birth and suffering. Son of God lines up with the atma, the self, Brahman, consciousness that is not bounded by time or body.
And the specific gospel phrases get precise correlations. I and Father are one is read as equivalent to the Mahavakya, I am Atma Brahma. And I am that I am from Exodus maps directly onto Aham Brahmasmi.
The one that carries the most philosophical weight is before Abraham was, I am, which the post reads as before Om, before the primordial sound that is itself still within Maya, the self already is.
That reading draws on a Vedantic logic where even the sacred mantra Om belongs to the manifest, and transcending it opens into what the post calls the most sacred silence.
There is a structural metaphor that keeps returning, mirror and reflection. You cannot separate them, and yet they are not identical in the ordinary sense.
The post is careful to distinguish two levels of reading. At the lower perspective, Son of Man and Son of God appear to describe two separate beings or natures. At the higher perspective, they are two aspects of one reality. The way a wave and the ocean floor are not ultimately two things.
And it lands a pointed observation about why these phrases get misread, which is not a gentle one.
The post names two failures directly: the absence of true surrender and the absence of deep self-inquiry. It acknowledges that theological study has its place for beginners, but holds that the Mahavakyas are, in its own words, affirmative and cannot be taught.
That is the crux. Intellectual understanding of non-duality and actually living from it are described as completely different registers of experience, one informational and one transformational.
The second Ramana quote reinforces exactly that. Know that to meditate on it is just to be at one with it within the heart. The knower and the known collapse into the same movement.
The post closes in on what it calls sleepless sleep, the state of pure awareness that the closest ordinary analog is deep, dreamless sleep, where there is no subject-object structure, no experiencer, just being itself.
Which is why the phrase, before Abraham was, I am, reads not as a historical claim about pre-existence, but as a pointer to the awareness that precedes any arising of thought, time, or identity. Whether the frame is biblical or Vedantic, the question being pressed is the same. What remains when the sense of being a separate self is not taken as the final word?
That is a question that does not get smaller the more you look at it. More from this territory next time.